Good morning. Welcome back everybody to day 2 of our Stroke Group Network Conference 2022. And a really warm welcome to anyone who is just joining us this morning. As we said yesterday, we have over 150 group representatives joining us for the 2-day event, and that's from across 122 groups from all corners of the UK. So a real warm welcome, lots of opportunities to connect with others from outside of your local area today. My name is Beth and I am the Group Networks Manager at the Stroke Association, and I'm always so honoured to chair this wonderful event. As Anne said, it was great having so many reflections and questions yesterday. It's wonderful to be here at this event with people who are really engaged and really want to input into the discussions and learn and teach us as well. There was so much interesting information coming from attendees in the chat box that we can learn from. So do share your experiences too. We have 3 sessions today. I hope you've got coffee at the ready, but they are all really, really fantastic sessions, which I'm super excited about. So the first one, which is now, is going to last about an hour. So we'll finish around 11, and this one is all about recruiting volunteers, and we've got such brilliant speakers on this one. So yeah, really hope you enjoy it. We know that volunteer recruitment can be a real challenge for so many groups, so we really wanted to focus on the programme with this topic. Our second session will start at 11:15 afterwards, so the second session of the day, and that's focusing on the importance of peer support. So you're out there running groups, you know how important peer support is. You see it with your own eyes every day, but we really wanted to bring to life research that some researchers at the Exeter Medical School have been leading for a good couple of years with us now, a real longitudinal study on our support groups, and there's some really interesting findings that Mark and Raf researchers want to share with you on the second session. And on that second session, we'll also have Dawn, who is a volunteer at Bruin Stroke Group, who is really thinking about practical ways to make sure groups really deliver what members want. So she's got some great experience coming from an occupational therapist background as well. And then our final session is again focusing on practical support for you. So our Group Networks officers, Julia and Sophia, will be taking you through the resources that are available to you and where you can find them. So we really hope that will be a useful session for you. And we are going to end on a celebration, so bringing to life all of the incredible work you do up and down the UK. So let's get started with our first session now that the housekeeping is done. The first session is recruiting and retaining volunteers. So we have Shazia from Self Help UK to share some of their top tips in this. And then we've got Danny and Anya from the Stroke Association, so Stroke Association staff sharing their perspective given their roles around this work. And then we have 2 wonderful volunteers, Stuart and Judy, who are out there leading support groups, and they have some really interesting experiences in this topic. So we hope that you can learn from them. But as well, keep sharing what you're doing in the chat box. So without further ado, it's probably enough of me. I am going to hand over to Shazia to take us into this first session. So sit back and enjoy. Thanks, Shazia.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth, and thank you for everyone who's organised this conference. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Shazia. I'm from Self Help UK. And today I'm going to be talking about volunteer recruitment and retention and some excellent tips as well to go with that. So a bit about Self Help UK. We started 40 years ago as an organisation that builds peer support and also self-help groups. And essentially, we promote the idea that self-help groups are groups that have first-hand understanding of a health condition. And we provide the tools and resources for groups to actually thrive and work effectively as well. So given the fact that I've got 10 minutes, I'm going to go straight into it. And I would like to just talk about volunteer recruitment. So if I can get the next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So volunteer recruitment can take place in so many different avenues. So you've got community and voluntary services. So essentially every city or every district will have a community and voluntary service. So in Nottingham, we have the NCVS for Nottingham, and we have Bassetlaw, Newark, and so forth. And a lot of these organisations will have newsletters, which you can promote your recruitment needs in there. Also, they use social media a lot, so there's a potential to connect with them too. We know that one of our projects, Macmillan Beyond Diagnosis, actually get most of their volunteers through the community and voluntary service. So that's always a good one to go through. Second is universities. University is a hotspot for volunteering. A lot of students demand volunteering as part of building their skill sets, their CV. But also universities have this duty, community duty, that they want to see. And so they'll set up things like volunteer fairs. The University of Nottingham has a group-led volunteer board called Carnival. And then Nottingham Trent University actually have a volunteer fair as well. So it's always good to get involved in that avenue too. Indeed, we all know that is normally for job vacancies, right? But you can also post volunteer promotions and recruitment needs on there. Posters are not dead. They're still alive and working, even though we're in the social media world now. But it's always helpful to have posters in GP surgeries and also in libraries, and also to encourage people to share them in their own workspaces as well. So if your volunteers are part-time and they're working elsewhere, they can share that information too. Social media is a great one. We all know how far Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, Snapchat and TikTok can go. So being creative is always helpful. And I know that technical stuff, technology might not be for everyone, but social media is a great spot to actually widen your scope and in accessing different people. On Facebook, you can actually boost your post. So if you post something, you can pay a nominal fee and they'll boost it as far and wide as possible. And community events and word of mouth, the power of that is it can be really productive. So community depending on the event that you're going to, you could have a stall there with some of your leaflets, a couple of people talking to individuals, and telling the community at large what you're up to and what you're doing. Word of mouth is really powerful. Use your volunteers as ambassadors for your group. Get them to share how amazing your group is. Sell it to others too. Recruitment by word of mouth is actually more stronger than all the other means that we found in our organization as well. And then this can actually translate in how many people will be interested in coming and just chatting to you about the potential and possibilities of recruiting with you as well. So a few top tips. Can I get the next slide, please? Wonderful. So monitor your recruitment avenues. Essentially, what this means is that if you are using these different avenues, have a look at what's working, what's generating interest, and what's actually allowing people to apply, and what's actually giving you future investment. Monitor it and keep an eye on where it's working. And those areas that it's not working, that's fine. Just concentrate on the areas that are. We can't fix everything when it comes to recruitment. Sometimes it can be a good turnout. Other times it can be not so great. So don't lose heart. Just look for the areas that are strong and is giving you back, and develop those in more. And the second part is also balance flexibility of the role and also make it meaningful for the individual. So for example, have a variety of roles. So don't stick to one set volunteer role. And what I mean by that is Everyone has different commitment levels. So you could have a long-term volunteer, you could have a short-term volunteer, or you could have a one-off volunteer. Having the diversity in the different types of volunteer opportunities might actually get you more volunteers through the door. One of the things that we always say is manage expectations. So make the actual role description really clear. Specify what's anticipated for the individual that's going to want to volunteer for you. Let them know how the recruitment process works. Also, another element is making it sound pleasing, because a lot of volunteers want to develop potentially themselves, their CVs as well. So there's an element of sharing why volunteer is good for them, but also for you as well in that sense, and bringing the wider community into the fold as well, and being quite diverse in skill set. You never know, you might end up having a volunteer that is so highly skilled that could really help you develop your group as well. So keep your options open, keep it wide, and try and be flexible if you can. And make the recruitment process simple. The last thing you want to do is create too many hurdles and loopholes for volunteers to jump over and through. Sometimes that might be off-putting. So it doesn't need to be as strict, as formal, but making sure that you've got your key elements in place, and that is the application process, the interviewing process, and the process that goes after in terms of offering them the position as well. Lovely. Can I get the next slide, please? So how do we keep our volunteers then? Create induction process. This is always something that is vital. From the onset, your organisation's values should be really clear, and they should be demonstrated not only in yourself, but also to the volunteer as well, and everything that you do. The process is a really good space to actually onboard the volunteer and make them feel at ease and part of that community that you're trying to create with your group as well. Make them feel valued at each stage. Communications plan. So the last thing that you would want to do, or anyone who's a volunteer would want, is they've gone through this amazing process, this induction process, and then they hear nothing. Keep a communications plan, and what that would include is how will you engage with your volunteers, and that can be a plan for a month, you could plan for 6 months, and you could plan for a whole year. That plan would include how you're going to engage with them. So let's say, for example, you would actually create a WhatsApp group, or you could go ahead and do email newsletters, volunteer newsletters. Our work with Macmillan by Beyond Diagnosis project that we do, they send out volunteer newsletters, which is always a hit, and lots of people do read them, open them and read them. Or you could even put in your communication plans to get together. So you've got a plan for the year, or plan for a month, or even 6 months, that tells you how you're going to engage with them. And that engagement will really keep the relationship alive and really allow growth and evolution to happen with that connection you make with your volunteers. The other aspect is celebrate and recognise your volunteers. This is great. There's a lot of organisations that do award ceremony on large scale, small scale, or medium scale, whatever works for you. You've also got case studies that you can use. Like, for example, when Beth was doing the introduction just now, she talked about, celebrating all the work you're doing. Do the same with your volunteers. Celebrate those wins and come together. We also know about the National Volunteer Week activities as well. Be a part of them. It's between the 1st and 7th of June. Make your volunteers feel valued. The payback will be immense. And then opportunities to engage. What does that mean? So you're giving your volunteers tasks to do. But like I mentioned before, they might have a real high level of skill set, maybe in social media. Get them involved in your social media. Let them help you develop your group even further. Let them be part of those projects as well that you're interested in. Invite them to meetings where you're having discussions and you're formulating ideas. Volunteers don't need to be always at the end of a process. So you've created your project and you need volunteers to help you man it. Volunteers could be part of the process of you creating an event, even as small as having a stall. Get the volunteers involved in terms of how it should work, what could work, where could work, and then let them see that through as well. Empowerment is such a strong word we use. Giving autonomy within guidelines that you want to set can actually benefit you in the long run and longevity of keeping your volunteers as well. And then volunteer support and training. It's always wise to have an idea of how you could support your member and your volunteer. The best way of doing that is asking them, catching up with them, saying, what else can you do? What else would be helpful? But also keeping an eye out on potential training. There's a lot of free online training that you can use to develop yourself and also team members. And there's a lot of funding out there too that can potentially do that. So skill sets like treasury work and accountancy work and so forth. And then finally, be flexible in everything you do. Be aware of the connections that you make. Being rigid in some instances can hinder your performance. So I want to just move on to my final slide then. So before I go, a few top tips. Not all groups are homogenous and one size does not fit all. Be aware that some people might come for a part-time volunteer role or a short or a long-term volunteer role. Demonstrate your commitment to your volunteer and connect with other organizations that are doing something similar than you, whether if it's a large scale or a small scale organization. Connect with their volunteers and their volunteer organizers, and then work out how you could work together to build a stronger volunteer community. And hopefully this information will serve to help you in recruiting and retaining your volunteers. I hope you enjoyed it and it was helpful. I know that there's going to be a Q&A session later on, so I'm happy to answer some questions. But now I'd like to hand over to Anya Pratt, who is going to talk through some examples of group volunteer role profiles at the Stroke Association. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shazia. Some very, very good tips there. So thank you indeed. Hi, everyone. So yes, my name's Anya. I'm an engagement officer in the East of England, and I'm going to be talking to you about the roles that we have in our Stroke Association support groups. So there are 4 main roles that we have in our support groups that help them run smoothly. They are stroke group volunteers. So our main role that makes up the majority of our volunteers is the stroke group volunteer. They assist in the running of one or more than one group. Some of them will volunteer at multiple groups, and they help support the group members. This is a face-to-face role, which is either full-time or part-time. Some go every week, some go monthly. There's that flexibility in that role. We also have the role of an online stroke group volunteer, which is one of our newer roles. And the purpose of the online support group volunteer is they assist a group remotely. So they will help with the online elements of a local group. So that might be setting up Zoom meetings. It might be sending out sort of monthly newsletters, sending out email updates, anything that can be done sort of remotely. So they don't have to attend the group in person themselves. The treasurer bookkeeper role is responsible for managing the group finances. They collect in the group's money, the subs, donations, and this role can be divided between 2 or more volunteers. And then if you're a group that provides transport to your members, which some groups like to do, then you will have volunteer drivers. And with that role, there are certain things that need to be provided by the drivers. So they have to produce their driving license, valid MOT, and adequate insurance. So that's the role of a volunteer driver. So that's just a quick brief look. So, and we're on to the next slide. Thank you. So just to talk a little bit more about couple of those roles. I'm just going to go over the support group volunteer role a little bit more detail. So with this role, as I mentioned, this tends to be the one that we get more volunteers fit into this role description, mainly because it can be flexed to suit the needs of the group. So when a group is looking to fulfill a particular gap, what we can do is pull out the responsibilities from that that role description and fit it into what that group is particularly looking for. We can take out the responsibilities that the group doesn't need and make it almost like, if you're looking for as a job description. So there's lots and lots of things that can be covered by a support group volunteer, because as we know, every group is different and has different things and different needs. So what we do is add in the responsibilities that are specific to the group. So that means we're recruiting volunteers to do the tasks that group specifically needs to run. An example, for this is you may have a group that is looking for somebody that takes the register at the beginning of each session and updates the membership details and make sure everybody's phone number is up to date, so that, for example, if a group doesn't meet one week because of bad weather, they can get in touch and let people know. So if you're going to advertise for a role like that, you want to volunteer to fit that specific role, you might put in the volunteer description that you advertise it around administration duties with attention to detail and potentially for somebody with experience in IT as an advantage, for example. And you would leave out things like, you wouldn't need to put in somebody that has experience of organising outings, for example. You would take those bits out of the advert because that's not what this particular group would be looking for. Next slide. So with this slide is with regards to the treasury role and the bookkeeping role, which again can be split between 2 or more people, or it can just be done by the one. And now this role is much more specific than the support group volunteer role, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have any flexibility in it. It does indeed have flexibility. So there is a list that's been made that lists all the tasks of what needs to be covered in the role, and this list can help you make sure everything is being done by your volunteers. And you can use it to identify and agree who is responsible for the different financial tasks by writing their name against each activity so that everyone is clear on what is being done and to make sure nothing is missed out. The type of tasks it includes are things like who takes in the subs and who counts it, as all subs need to be counted by 2 separate people at each session. So by having the list and allocating people's names to it, then that's already agreed who is responsible for that. And it helps you delegate. And it takes the pressure off it being just one person, should you wish to. That doesn't mean everyone has to have multiple people as their treasurer, but it gives you that option. It also gives you the opportunity to have different people for the other smaller parts that are involved in the finances, such as writing letters of thank you when you get donations given to the group. So it's not just about who goes to the bank and who counts the money, and there's the other parts of the roles that are involved in finances. So, and who's the card holder, who's going to go out and purchase the things needed. If you're having arts and crafts session, somebody's going to go out and buy the materials. So it enables you to make those choices by having this list and deciding who's going to do this and who's going to do that, and potentially who's going to do that in their absences. So, and then you have the treasurer that is then recording the income and the outcome and submitting that monthly to the team. But not everything has to be completed by the treasurer. Like I mentioned, it can be a split role. I have a group that I work with in Norfolk where one volunteer is the card holder and the banker, if you like. They get the cash out and they take the banking from the subs and they take it down to and pay it in. And a second volunteer completes the monthly spreadsheets and pays all the invoices online, etc. And they cover the role between the 2 of them, and that works perfectly for them. So that's just 2 examples of the roles that we have in a little bit more detail. Again, as Shazia mentioned, there's a Q&A at the end of this session, so you can ask a little bit more about those roles if you like. Now let me just introduce you to Stuart Church, who's a volunteer from our Chesterfield Stroke Group, and he's sharing his experience of dividing up the financial responsibilities between volunteers.
Hi, I'm Stuart from Chesterfield Stroke Group. I'll start with a description of the group. Chesterfield is in North East Derbyshire, about 12 miles south of Sheffield. Chesterfield Stroke Group was set up 7 years ago. We are a stroke association support group, a group run for stroke survivors by volunteers who are themselves stroke survivors. We are supported by Velma, our engagement officer for the Midlands, and we are very fortunate that in the north, that NHS Derby and Derbyshire Integrated Care Board provides funding for stroke association coordinators. Not every area will have a stroke recovery service, but we are fortunate to have one, and we will work very closely with the coordinators. The coordinators cover an area of North East Derbyshire. They are not tied to a stroke group. The local hospital informs the coordinators of stroke survivors about to be discharged, and the coordinators direct these stroke survivors to wherever they think appropriate support is available. This could be a gym, swimming pool, and obviously the local stroke group. I had my stroke 16 years ago. It occurred during a surgical procedure. Damage caused by surgery to proceedings over the stroke, but over time stroke complications came to the fore. I eventually joined Chesterfield Stroke Group and took on the role of chair 6 years ago. If we had 12 people attending, we classed it as a big group. Initially, we did art activities, but as the number of members increased, it became harder to get everyone involved. Now we frequently have up to 40 people attending. This group operates in a hub and spoke model. What this means is that we have one main volunteer team or committee, and this team oversees more than one activity group. Today, the main group is basically a social group. All the members are at different stages of their stroke recovery, and we can all support one another. At each meeting, I invite a speaker to come and talk to us, or ask a long-term member to talk about their stroke. It is very popular with the newer members as they can relate to what is said and they can ask questions, and the whole stroke group will get involved in the discussion. For the final hour of the meeting, we have tea, coffee, huge amounts of cake that members donate, and we chat. Nothing formal, but friendship groups have formed. We do have members who are designated as meeters and greeters, but to be honest, everyone does it. In the last hour, it is like watching a slow motion musical chairs as people move around from one individual to a different group to another. One of the spokes, that is another activity our group covers, is the Stroke Cafe, in which we work very closely with the hospital early discharge stroke team. The cafe in reality is that rarity in a hospital, an empty room that stroke staff have found. Stroke group members meet in this room having taken tea, coffee, biscuits, etc. And then staff bring stroke survivors to us. Those who are about to be discharged, and we talk. They talk about their fears of going home, what will happen. We can reassure them, having experienced it ourselves. Another important point is that they can see us fellow stroke survivors having a life, going on holiday, etc. They can see that there is life after stroke. This group hasn't run for a few years now, but hospital staff are very keen to get it working again. Another activity group we run is the working age group. This is for people of any age, but tend to support the younger stroke survivors who had their stroke a very short time ago. People who want to get their lives back on track quickly and may want to get back to work. In many cases, people in this group haven't yet comprehended the full extent of their hidden disabilities. The size of this group is kept small, about 12 people, small enough so that members can become familiar with each other, trust built, and confidence. This helps them talk about themselves and express emotions. Working age group works in blocks of 6 meetings. There is no shortage of people wanting to attend. Finances. I'm going to move on to finances now and talk about how we split the responsibilities between volunteers and financial management. Stroke Association support groups are self-funded from sources such as member contributions, donations and fundraising events. The groups are under the Stroke Association's charitable status, and any money we raise, we are responsible for financial best practice. There are rules and regulations to follow when managing charitable money. So, Stroke Association keep a close eye on our spend. It is not to keep an eye on what we buy, but more of a case of preventing fraud and having the right accounts in place for audit by the Charity Commission. The Treasurer is one of the most important people on the committee and keeps a close eye on group finances. Every spend must have a receipt. The Treasurer submits accounts to the Stroke Association Finance Department every month. The Treasurer will have a prepaid card which works like a debit card and is attached to our stroke group account so we can pay for our venue, etc. Initially, there was one person doing all of the financial responsibilities. He attended each meeting and paid the venue for use of the hall. He still attends meetings, but as he works full time, he is not available all the time, which means that we can't pay for the goods we need. I was paying for tea, coffee, etc., and paying for room hire for the working age group with my own money and claiming it back. This was tedious work, remembering to make a claim and then remember to check that it had been paid into my account. We had a conversation with the finance team and worked out that I could be the card holder while someone else could be the bookkeeper. Now I buy everything using the card. It's as simple as tap and go, but you must get a receipt. I can also access internet banking for the account. Using this, I authorize payments and pay invoices. One of our volunteers manages a group phone, so people can contact her about the group. She uses an old phone that is used only for stroke group work. This sometimes comes at a cost, as she will also make calls on it. Every month, the SIM card is topped up and I'm sent off the electronic receipt. I then send money directly to her bank account by using internet banking. Now, every month I log onto internet banking and download a bank statement for the previous month. I scan in all the receipts individually and send the bank account statement along with all the electronic copies of the receipts, not forgetting the SIM card receipt, and send it off to the bookkeeper. He checks it over, does the account spreadsheet, so it all balances, and sends it to the Stroke Association finance team. At the stroke group, we collect contributions in coins. When I have sufficient coins, I bag it up and take it to the post office. This is another task that I do instead of the bookkeeper. We are finding it far better having two of us split the responsibilities of financial management. It means less pressure on one person and also means the bookkeeper doesn't need to come to the group every meeting, but can volunteer remotely if necessary.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful insights there from Stuart. Thank you so much. I think the theme here that is coming out is absolutely around delegation of roles and flexing the opportunities of how people can give support to your group. And I think it's really interesting. Stuart talks about not having to actually physically be at the group in order to support it. So that was a really interesting insight. Thank you, Stuart. And lovely to hear about the work you do in your group as well and bringing that activity to life. Okay, I just also wanted to mention that the checklist and the support group volunteer role profiles, if you're interested in any of those, are on our intranet. And I know Sophia and Julia will be doing a session at the end of today that's talking about those resources and where you can find them on the intranet. So it is available for you and we can support you to get them after the conference. Okie dokie, we have our next speaker. So this really lovely to welcome Danny from our people team at the Stroke Association. And she's just going to give a few insights into some of our checks that we carry out with our volunteers as part of onboarding. Over to you, Danny.
Thank you, Beth. So I'm going to talk about the onboarding process for volunteers who join us at the Stroke Association. And we require all volunteers to provide us with a minimum of 2 referee details. We also complete ID checks, and this is asking potential volunteers to confirm who they actually are. An example of this would be photo ID, such as a driving licence or a passport. We also request for police checks to be carried out for certain roles. An example would be the support group volunteer and driver roles. For the online support group volunteer in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, the role doesn't require a police check, but it does in Scotland. We do not require a police check for the treasurer and bookkeeper roles. At the moment, we are able to view documents for the ID and police checks over video call, so people can show us their documents to the camera. Anyone with convictions or cautions will be looked at on an individual basis, and having convictions or cautions does not necessarily stop someone from volunteering with us. If the police check contains content, we will speak to the individual regarding the circumstances about it. We also have trial periods, so that allows us and the volunteers to see if the role suits them, and we do this all for the best practice purposes. I'd like to hand back to Anya now, who's going to talk about the essential training for volunteers.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks very much for that. So for all our volunteers, there's just a small amount of essential training that we offer, and we also offer some additional training that volunteers can choose to do should they wish to. But with our essential training, there is an induction to the charity where you learn a little bit more about us and what we do and why we do it. And all this training is available online. We do an introduction to GDPR, which is all about how we protect people's information, and an induction to safeguarding too. These are all booked and done online through our new Learn platform, which is a really easy to use tool online, which every volunteer, when they join the Stroke Association, has access to this. For those that need support online, that's available for us too, which we can talk about later. Next slide, please. So in addition with the training, there are some additional trainings that can be specific just to groups. So it doesn't mean that everyone has to do it, but each group has to have someone that can do it. So each group has to have somebody that's trained in health and safety for that group. At least one person, if not more, a group has to have someone that is trained in first aid, which is done face to face at their local St John ambulance unit. However, if the venue that you hold your group at has somebody permanently at the venue that is trained in first aid, then you don't have to have somebody at the group. You can be covered by the first aid of that venue. So, for example, we have groups that meet in coffee shops. So you will find that staff will be trained in first aid. So therefore, you don't have to have an individual at the group. Finance training is provided. That's only required for the treasurer and the bookkeeper. Driver safety tips are available, obviously, for any group volunteer drivers. And also there's lots and lots of stroke specific information that is available too. More detail on the stroke specific information will be provided on session 5 today. But in the meantime, if you are interested, do have a look on my stroke guide and the website information, which is all on there. So that's just a little overview on the essential training for volunteers. And now I'd like to introduce Judy King from our Newbury Speakability Group, who's going to share her top tips on recruitment and retention of volunteers.
Hi. Yes, I'm Judy King. I was a deputy head teacher who decided that she didn't want to be a head teacher. So I actually left because 2 of my family members had strokes. And whilst I was helping with their care, I learned an awful lot about strokes. And during that time, I applied for a job as a family support organiser for West Berkshire. It was a part-time job, which I did for about 12 years. And I became really aware that the one thing that wasn't, much for was for people who had aphasia, some sort of communication problem. And I decided to set up a group which I called Speakability. So over the last decade or so, it's been really become very, very well established, and it's a very recognisable charity in West Berkshire. We've got about 35 members. We meet twice at a hotel in a month, and we meet twice at a garden centre, and we have probably 10 volunteers at the moment as well, so we're very, very lucky. I think that personal networking locally is really important. So recruiting the right volunteers, it means looking for potential local sources. So what we try and do is we try to create a presence and a profile by sending articles and photographs to the local papers. We send articles to parish magazines all about aphasia. Do you know anyone who has aphasia? We get in touch with health centres, and any local free handouts, we try to get something in those so that more and more people are aware of our group. What we try to do is we contact all the clubs in the area, local contacts, churches, schools, universities. One of our members said her niece was a speech therapist, and she was a speech therapist at her local school for the deaf. So we took advantage of that, and she came and volunteered with us initially. She now runs her own business, and she gives speech therapy to 14 of our members every time we meet. So that's another reason why we really have to raise awareness to get money, because it costs us £75 an hour, and she does 2 hours for us every time we meet. I think the biggest example that I've got is that I've used rock choir. So rock choir is national. You can use rock choir as well, and they do lots and lots of fundraising. It's very good as well because people who have aphasia can very often sing songs that are remembered, whereas they might be losing a word or losing sentences. I always, and they have raised money for us, I always go along and I make a point of saying a personal thank you and telling everybody what the money was being spent on. So the first time I did this, I took 2 of my group with me. Dave explained how he lost words and said that he used to be an actor. He could try to learn some words, but he couldn't deliver them always in the right order. And then Hannah, who was only 37 when she had her stroke, she said, "Me, jogging." With prompting, she was able to say her son's name, which is not usually easy. Proper nouns are hard. And then she counted the age of her son on her fingers. And then again, she said, "Me, stubborn." That was her word for never giving up. And I told her, everybody, that she used to be in a choir and that we had set a goal that she wanted to join a choir again. Well, as you can imagine, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And from that, just that one evening, we gained 3 volunteers, and also one who said that he worked full time, but he could give us 1 hour just twice a month. Also that night came an offer from somebody who ran a camera club, said, "I'll bring the cameras, I'll bring some of my people along with me, my volunteers, and I'll give you an interactive presentation." And when one lady came along with the camera club, she said, "I really want to be a part of this wonderful group." So now I had 5 volunteers, which was great. And even better, one of those volunteers just happens to have become the Mayor of Newbury this year. So lucky me and lucky us. And yes, in case you're wondering, Hannah did achieve her goal. She now attends a daytime rock choir. She's done 2 gigs, and her choir raised money for her. She thanked them and told them that the money would be spent on speech therapy. When we sat down, 3 people actually put £5, £10 and £20 in my pocket. Wasn't I lucky? Paid for services rendered, somebody said. At the end of the session, a husband and wife came up to me and said they would like to give us £150 to pay for 2 hours of speech therapy. And the wife said, "Well, I used to be a special needs teacher." So that made volunteer number 6. Now, I did mention that this year's mayor is a volunteer. He's raising awareness for us, and he's also doing fundraising. So that's great. These evenings were, I was just trying to think, 5 years ago, I think those evenings were, and the volunteers are still with us today. So I mentioned churches and schools. I went along to a church to thank them for raising money at their Christmas tree festival, and went back later with 2 more members to say thank you and tell them about the visit to Crocodile World and the lunch that they had paid for us. Another interested volunteer came when we had coffee afterwards, and she said, "I could come once a month. I'll come, I'll see. It sounds great." We also have students. I have students who want to be speech therapists. So they come along, and that works really, really well for us. So what do I do when I have a new volunteer? I always meet a new volunteer one-to-one at a neutral venue for a coffee and a chat, tell them about our group. I give them a volunteer pack, and this has got a short background of members, such as their life and work pre-stroke and their goals that they want to set for the future. Obviously, permission has been gained and they have signed that I can do this. I tell them about aphasia. I talk about giving time. face-to-face contact and not finishing sentences. I try to tell them to initiate conversations. Can the person give a clue? Can they write a word? Can they draw a picture? And we make sure that all our members have a small book that's called Ask Please. You can buy it from Amazon. It's got hundreds of pictures, so everybody has always got one of those on hand. I chat about encouraging independence. They're stroke survivors, not stroke victims. We have a coffee machine. People are not waited on. The coffee machine, we have screw top vacuum flasks as well, easier for somebody with just one hand, whereas volunteers can carry the coffee back or the tea for them. And I always say to them, there is absolutely no pressure to attend every meeting because we've all got another life. Then let's think, do they have any questions? Communication loss can be quite daunting for new volunteers, so they do usually ask about that. I say, try us for a few meetings as an induction, and then you'll gain some experience. And as they go along, always have feedback as they go. As they gain confidence and experience, I find what they might like to be doing with the group. What are their ideas? What are their thoughts? And really make sure that they realize what an important part they are. They're part of who we are, and they're part of what we do with our group. Make your new volunteer feel that they are going to make a difference, and they should really, really feel rewarded. So how do I retain volunteers? How do we do it? Everybody at Speakability wears an extra large lanyard with their first name on it. So when the volunteers have completed all their induction and all their checks, they are presented with their own stroke association lanyard, and also we buy them a free t-shirt and give them that as well. We cover all the costs of their outings, any costs of their meals, show our appreciation for their invaluable contributions. Instead of having lots of meetings, we have an informal review following each session. So for any volunteers who are free to stay, they stay, and we talk over what we're going to do next. Now, to retain volunteers, I really feel that they should be given a real job to do. So for Tony, who can only come for 1 hour because he works full time, he's our meter and greeter. We make absolutely sure that we thank him and everybody waves when he leaves. Norman takes the money and smiles at everybody. Liz offers transport at the end to anybody who would like it. Gary emails everyone on Sundays and tells them what's happening or what's not happening. Rod is our treasurer. He also runs a Zoom group for a group of men. They call it the shed. They say what's said in here stays in here. I have no idea what they talk about, but I do know there's a lot of laughter that goes on behind a closed door. Miriam updates all the birthdays and special anniversary lists. She's the holder and presenter of the cards, and all our cards are made by members of the group. Ruth often does a table of craft work, and she helps someone with writing and spelling. Anne assists with worksheets that the speech therapist has given to some of the people with aphasia. And Karen, well, Karen worked on strategic projects when she was working. Great, I thought. She helps me to look at the big picture. She helps me to think through any problems, and at the moment she's working on a project that she calls "What Would We Do If Judy Was Run Over by a Bus?" So she's collating all the details needed for any delegation, just in case that bus came along. So what I would say lastly is always be inclusive. Make your group enjoyable. Ours is characterized very much by fun, laughter. It's an environment where everybody feels comfortable and there's no distinction between the members and the volunteers. Now, for example, I had a volunteer who unfortunately isn't with us anymore. People find it hard. Names are hard for aphasic people. She used to come in every time and she would bend over and everybody would shout, "Eileen, Eileen," and we would all laugh. And on my birthday this year, we played Pass the Parcel. So we did it to nursery rhymes. They were singing "Old MacDonald Had a Farm," E-I-E-I-O. And when the music stopped, they were still doing "Moo Moo here, Bar Bar there, Cluck Cluck here." Absolutely hilarious. The volunteers said, "Please, can we do it again? Can we do a Christmas one?" I said, "Okay." Well, speech therapist wasn't here this week, so that was your speech therapy, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for giving me your time. It's not an ideal model to be copied. Each group is very, very different, but we should always be aware of responding to our members' needs and the very, very special gifts and talents of our volunteers. We've come a long way. We've still got further to travel, and it's always work in progress. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, Judy, thank you so much. I was sitting here smiling for the whole 10 minutes, listening to all of your top tips, but also how you bring to life what the ethos is for your group around fun friendship. And I think what's really coming through as well in these talks, and particularly yours again, Judy, reiterating what others have said, is this empowerment for volunteers. So really ensuring that every volunteer is at the heart of decision making in your groups, so they know they have an impact in the development of the group, not only in the delivery of it. And I think that is a wonderful theme to be emerging from today. So before we go into questions and answers, because I think the chat box has been buzzing, which is lovely, I'd like to bring Anne just back on camera, if she is there, to give us some reflections from some of the comments.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone, for being so engaged in the chat today. Great to see such connections going on. We've got people joining from Edinburgh all the way down to Sussex and lots of places in between. Kim and Angie have talked about their connections at the watch party yesterday and how they've enjoyed that. And Angie also commented that she met Stuart, one of our speakers, just at the watch party, and thanked him for his excellent insight into the workings about his group. Lots of praise for the information being given in this session. Great presentation. Thanks for Stuart and Judy for sharing their experiences, and for Judy raising the awareness and guidance for those people with aphasia and communication difficulties. Everyone thinks you've got a very well organised group there, Judy, and found it very inspirational. Just a few reflections on some of the topics that were covered by our earlier speakers. Everybody likes the idea of recognising and acknowledging our volunteers. So Laurie talks about Thank You Day. They do gifts for their volunteers at Christmas, and they also do a Volunteer of the Year, which their members vote for. They do note that it's hard to pick one volunteer, and there's a huge contribution that every single volunteer makes to a group, and it adds to the whole group experience. And that volunteers are really the backbone of our groups, and we should celebrate and thank them. Small gestures can go a long way, thank you cards and certificates. And Alan from Stonemarket Stroke Support Group said he goes to his local volunteer centre and attends a few fairs, and that gives him some success in finding volunteers. But he also does get stuff on the Stroke Association website and word of mouth. And Laurie too is attending a volunteers fair. And a few comments about the training. People like the online training. They find that that's easier to attend. Lots of points about first aid. Thank you all for being honest and open about that. Please do share your comments. We will make note of those. And some tips about sharing particular roles out. If you've got a busy group where you've got a lot of transactions taking place, they do find that it's the treasurer's role can be helped if it's split out between a number of people, but that does depend on each individual group. So thank you all for all those comments, and please do keep posting your questions and we'll get as many answered as we can.
Oh, thank you so much, Anne. Wonderful summary. I think we could do a whole day on this topic, couldn't we? From all the expertise you're sharing as well within the chat. We'll try and capture it all so that we can share it afterwards. It's fantastic to hear from you all. Okay, well, we've got 9-10 minutes. I want to make sure we end at 11, so you've got a good 15-minute break before the next session. So I'll bring back the speakers. Unfortunately, Stuart can't be with us today for the live session, but we've got Shazia, Danny, Anya, Judy to all join us with your lovely faces on screen. Fantastic. Thank you all. So we have had a few particular questions, so I'll go into those now. The first one was about the certificate of sort of celebration, I suppose, Shazia, because you absolutely highlighted that early on. Do you know if there's any templates or anywhere that people could find these certificates?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to create them from scratch because there's some great organizations online that are creating them for you. There's templates that you can Google. So you could put a volunteer recognition certificate template, or even better is you could actually access something called Canva. So it's CANVA. Canva actually has lots of templates that you can use for anything. So it could be posted to advertise, it could be certificates as well. And on there, you've got, I think, more than 100 templates for certificates that you can change. So you can actually change the writing, what you want in there. You can put the person's name in there. And the great thing about it, it's free to create. So you can create your own account through Canva, create your free certificate or posters, and you can change them. You can change the colors. So if it's a blue certificate and you're not quite liking that color, want it a bit brighter, you can change the color. You can then put the names in. And there is an element to that where you can then sign in and save all of your creations through that. The second level is you can pay for more extras too, but with everything, or with everything like that, when it's to do with creativity, there'll always be an option to go one step further and pay a little bit more for more designs. So yeah, I would probably recommend Canva as a good, I'm plugging an organization. I should have got something for free for that. No, it's really good. We've used it and it's also really user friendly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shazia. And yeah, there are certificates as well that we've probably got at the Stroke Association that we can share. So I think, well, after the session, we could do a few links in the exhibition and make sure that you can find those things over the next few days if you just revisit the platform as well. Because I'm acutely aware, obviously, at this conference, we have Stroke Association support group volunteers that are leading groups as part of the charity. And we have independently run groups that are separate to the charity, but are absolutely connecting and being part of our network. So there are slightly different offers that we have depending on your group type. So what I would say is if you can join session 5 later, what we're going to do is split the audience so that Stroke Association volunteers will be talking to Julia, one of our networks officers, about some of the support we give to groups that are part of the charity, and Sophia will be talking to independently run groups about the offers that we have in our benefits pack for groups that are part of the network but not part of the charity. So I just wanted to flag that as well. So do join session 5 that will hopefully clarify some of this as well. Fantastic. We had a good question about are DBSs needed, and I suppose DBS is the police check in England and Wales. So when we say DBS, it's for those two countries. Just to clarify, we've got PVG, that's the police check in Scotland, which is protecting vulnerable groups. That's what that PVG stands for, and that's the check in Scotland. And then we've got Access NI, which is the check in Northern Ireland. So there are different police checks. They're called different things across the UK. So I know that you picked up on that as well, didn't you, Danny? So you were talking about the different roles at the Stroke Association in terms of our groups. And if there is a role that is very much front facing and working with vulnerable people, as our group volunteer role is, then absolutely the police checks are needed. So what we also said on that session, didn't we, Danny, is the online group volunteer is slightly different, because in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, it doesn't require a police check, but in Scotland it does, because they have slightly different requirements. So there's a slight change there. In terms of the treasurer and bookkeeper, the role in itself doesn't warrant a police check. But if a treasurer or bookkeeper was also at a group face to face and providing support, then that activity that they are doing would warrant the check. So it's all about the type of activity that the volunteer is carrying out. But if people would like further discussions around this, then we can absolutely take that away and try and put something on. Maybe part of our online network sessions that we could do next year, because we ran 2 of them this year, didn't we, on the SALT awareness and the physical activity. So there could be a theme there that we could carry on. Would anyone like to talk about the word onboarding? Because we used it a few times. I quite like that word. But one of the questions was, does onboarding mean recruitment process and training? Would anyone like to reflect on the word onboarding, what it means to you?
I've heard of paddle boarding.
Slightly different.
I know.
I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah. So essentially, it's about bringing people into the fold. It's that process of introducing them to yourself, to the rest of the volunteers, what you do, and bringing them into that rhythm of your working style as well. So onboarding is about inviting them in and giving them those tools and welcoming notes that they need. So that could be, if you're inviting them to meet the rest of the volunteers, you could do that in any place, like a coffee shop. That's part of the onboarding process. So it's basically, if you think it's a ship, your group is a ship, and they're still at the platform. It's just taking that step from the platform onto the ship. That's the onboarding. A bit more to that, but it's about that. It's about them taking that journey with you.
Yeah, and I think that's very true, because I've got the people from Rock Choir. They know each other. I now go to Rock Choir, so it's very much friendship, lots of friendship.
Yeah,
Lovely.
and it's also how we integrate people into the organisation as well. So, yeah.
I think from my perspective as an engagement officer, when I'm helping a group to recruit new volunteers, when someone's applied for a role and they're already interested, one of the first things we do is I'll often do like a little phone chat with that person, say, like, this is a little bit more about us, this is a little bit more about the group, and it's sort of like a little informal chatty interview. And for me, that's kind of like the first stage of onboarding. They're already kind of interested, and now this is a bit more about us. Are you still interested? Why are you interested? That's the kind of ice-breaking onboarding bit for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is just getting your group known. I mean, that's the way we get volunteers, because everybody's like, they think, oh, do they all just sit round and do nothing? Well, absolutely not. No, fun.
Yeah.
It's all about fun.
Absolutely, Judy. And we've had a few reflections coming in about your sample pack. So your welcome pack to the volunteers, Judy, and people are wondering if we can see that and share that and take some guidance from what you're producing. So would that be all right if we have a share of that later in the next few days?
Yeah.
Fantastic, wonderful. And David Jones also made a really interesting comment about, he works with quite a lot of charities, and I think obviously, because it's best practice, a lot of charities require the same thing. So ID checks, police checks, and then the training around safeguarding GDPR. And he was making a comment, can we all not get together as charities and save on the admin process, and have one coordinator at all, which is a really interesting idea, David. So I think we should carry on some of that thinking. Pooling resources is always really, really interesting. Okay, I think we are going to have to wrap up because we're at 11. So thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful session. How much can we pack in an hour? It's brilliant. So thank you all so much.